Masechet Yevamot, Daf Kof Tet Vav. We began the 15th Perek yesterday with a Mishnah that says that a wife is believed to come and say, my husband has died, and then she can remarry or do Yibum. However, if there was a time of war and she came back from a war zone and she says, my husband died, then ironically we do not believe her. You might think, well, if it's a war zone, it's more likely that she's correct. The problem is that in a regular case where she said, my husband is dead, we assume that she actually saw him, and however he died from a disease or a wound, whatever it is, she must have actually seen him die. In a war zone, however, it could be that she is simply presuming, I saw him in the middle of the war, and I saw arrows flying all over the place, so she presumed, maybe accurately, maybe not, a high probability that he died, but she did not actually see him dead. So it could be that he survived, could be that he got medication and got better. And so therefore, we do not rely on her word. Then we saw a few other cases of if there's a famine or a plague, although similar to war or not. And so now we're going to ask another variation of that case. If she herself told us that there was a war zone, and we didn't even know that beforehand. And then we're going to get to a case of one witness in general, and on Amud Bet, the issue of identification of lost objects and similar things. So here's our opening question. If a wife comes and says, we were in this country and there's a war there, and we didn't have the news to know that there was a war there, and then she says, and my husband died. On the one hand, we can say a kind of amigo, because why would she lie and say that there was a war and my husband is dead? She could have said, if she wanted to be convincing, she could have simply came and said, my husband is dead, and we would believe her. She didn't have to say that there is a war. So if she wanted to lie, she could have made an easier lie, and therefore we should believe her. If we already knew there was a war, then we don't believe her. But now that she is providing that information, which downgrades her claim, but since she's providing it herself, so we should believe her claim. Or, on the other hand, we can say that since she maintained, now we have a chazakah, we know that there is a war, she may not be wanting to lie, she might not be lying on purpose, but she is making a presumption. And so, therefore, the argument of why would I lie does not come and undermine the presumption that there is a war. In other words, because we don't suspect that she's purposely lying. This is not like a monetary case where someone is going to try their best to say whatever they can in order to attain money. Here, it's not for her benefit to lie and say my husband is dead if she doesn't actually think her husband is dead, because that will lead her to problems later should the husband never return. So the problem here is that she's saying innocently, there is a war, and I presumed she says my husband is dead, but maybe it was still based on a presumption, and so we need to investigate further. Okay, so that's the two sides of the question, and now we're going to offer a couple of attempts at an answer. They're not going to answer the question, Tashema, but we'll try. Abraita. Ishinu alenu bait, ishinu alenu me'adha. If a woman comes and says, some people came and they filled our house with smoke, or filled our cave with smoke. House being on smoke, meaning it was set on fire. Cave, this was a war tactic. If people are hiding out in a cave, in order to get them out, you smoke them out, even in modern warfare. So we were in some place, and the place was full of smoke. Who met vani nisalti? And she says, furthermore, my husband died, I was saved, I was able to get out. Enane emenet, she is not believed. So here, this seems to be a parallel to the question that we have. We didn't know about this house on fire or a cave that was smoked out. So she's telling us in the first place that there was such a problem, and she is also telling us that he died. And yet she is not believed. You see, in this case, she didn't say, I actually saw my husband's body and I saw him dead. She is just assuming that she ran out and her husband didn't. So it's a presumption. So you see, according to this, in our question, when she's the one that, even though she's the one that tells us that there is a war, still we suspect it may be based on a presumption that she says my husband is dead and she doesn't really know. So this seems to be a good proof for leniency, but then we say no. Oh, in this case, it's different because we can tell her, well, just like a miracle happened to you and you were able to escape, maybe a miracle happened to your husband also, and he somehow survived, right? You ran away and you didn't see where he went, but it could be that he actually did survive. And so therefore, this case is more lenient than the case of when there is war, because it is possible to escape from such a danger of a fire. Okay, so the cases are not equivalent, and instead, right, after all, she did in fact escape because they were in the same danger, whereas in the case of war, probably he went to war, he went out to battle, and she was not necessarily in the war. So there's less of a reason in the battle case to assume that he escaped, so there's more reason to believe her. So therefore, it's not quite the same. Okay, Tashema. Naflu alenu goyim, naflu alenu listim. Another braita brings a case where a wife comes and says, oh, we were traveling and a group of goyim came and attacked us, or a group of thieves came and attacked us. Hu met v'nisarti, and my husband died and I was saved. Ne'emenet. In this case, she is believed. Now here also, she's the one telling us the circumstances, which are similar to war, right? There was some kind of terrible danger, lethal danger, and since she is the one telling it to us, and she is the one that testifying my husband is dead, she is believed. So too in the case of war. She told us about the war, and she says my husband is dead. We should believe her. This is the opposite outcome of the previous one. But we say, no, that this one is also different. Hatam kederav idi, damar Rav idi, isha kele zeina aleha. Davidi said that a woman is different. The reason that she is believed here is that it is in fact likely that the woman was able to escape, because kele zeina aleha, a woman is generally not killed by thieves, because there's a couple of ways to explain this. Either the fact that she is a woman protects her. Literally, it means her weapons are with her. But what weapons does a woman have? Maybe the fact that she is a woman, therefore she's not the target for the thieves. The thieves are going to kill the man who is either holding the money or is fighting against the thieves. So the woman, because she's a woman, or maybe it means that the men are likely to rape her. That's all they want from her. They don't want to kill her. And so therefore it's likely that she escaped and that he did not escape. Unlike the previous case wherein the man and the wife were in the same type of danger, and if she escaped, then it's equally likely that he escaped, so we don't believe her. In this case, since the man is in bigger danger from thieves than the woman is, so the fact that she escaped does not detract from the likelihood that the husband is in fact dead. And so therefore, this case, there's more reason to believe her. Also, how is this different from war? It is different from war. In a case of thieves, there's only a few people around. She'd be able to see and assess the situation better, and more likely, she actually knows or saw that the husband died. In war, where there's a fog of war and so much going on, it's more likely that she may not have actually seen him die, but is only presuming that he went to that battle and never came back. He's probably dead. Okay, so those are the two proofs, and one is too lenient and the other proof is too stringent, and so in the end we have no direct answer for the case of war. Now, a story. Hahu gabra de bishilhe hidule itle nura begenanem. A certain man, he got married, and at the end of the wedding celebration, a fire broke out in his bridal chamber. They would, we build a chuppah today, we only use it for an hour, but they would build or have a home that they would live in, the new bride and groom, for 7 days and have all their celebrations there. So anyway, there was a fire in it. Amru lehu debitu hazu gabrai. And his wife was screaming. She was standing in front of the fire, in front of the house burning down, and says, look, a man, meaning my husband. Look, my husband, he's inside. and he's burning. So people came and they saw that there was a man who was burnt that was there, and they also saw a palm of a hand severed that was also lying there. So a burnt man and a severed palm. So now we have a mystery situation. We got to figure this out. Savad Rav Chiya bar Abin lememar, Hainu ishinu alenu bait, ishinu alenu me'ara. So Rav Chiya says this seems to be the same as the case above that we quoted here, where she is not believed. So too, right? Maybe just like she escaped and she was not burned, so too the husband was burned, and therefore he was thinking we should not believe her. Amarava midame hatam la ka'amra chazuk abrai chazuk abrai ve'od gabra charucha dishti ufista deyada deshadya. Rava says no, these two cases are not similar at all. Number one, in the case above, she was not standing in front of the cave or in front of the house saying, "Look, my husband is in there. My husband is in there." Right? We weren't there at all. She just came and told us about something that happened. In this case, she's actually standing in front, identifying, saying, my husband is in there. So that gives more likelihood. And second of all, in this case here, there is an actual body, a burnt body, and a hand, right? So someone definitely died. The body is burnt beyond identification. So that's why we don't know. But since there is a body there, and she is saying, that is my husband, so that's very likely that this is true. Whereas in the previous case, there is no body. There's some cave somewhere that we don't have access to. So that's much less of a reason to believe her. So therefore, Rava said, we should believe her here. Okay. Now, Rav Chiya bar Avin. Now, this is very convincing. What was Rav Chiya bar Avin thinking when he said we don't believe her? Regarding the dead, burnt body that's there, maybe this was someone else, a fireman, someone who came to try to save him, and he went into the fire, and he sadly got burnt. And the fire burnt him. Regarding the severed hand, that must belong to the husband. And while he was in there, he was trying to get out, and his hand was severed, and then he had a mum, he had a blemish, he had no hand. And he was too embarrassed to come back into a society where everybody knows him. Going to say, oh, look, his hand. He has no hand. And so he ran away to a different part of the world where nobody would know him. And so Rav Chiya is saying, it's possible, technically, that this is not the man, and your husband ran away, and he escaped. You escaped, so maybe he also did escape. And that was his thinking. That's why he did not believe her in that case. Okay, that's the end of the discussion regarding a wife. But now we're going to talk about a related discussion regarding one witness. We know that in general, one witness is believed to say, I saw a man who is dead, so that his wife can remarry. So how about in cases like this? Right, we also know that a wife is believed in a general case to say, my husband died. But if it's time of war, then we believe the wife less. How about for one witness? Also, if it's a time of war, do we believe one witness less? On the one hand, maybe we should believe the one witness even in a time of war, because the reason why we believe one witness, usually we need two witnesses. The reason why we believe one witness is because this is something that will become known. Give it some time, and if the husband is alive, probably someone will see him or he'll show up. So no one's going to come to court and lie if it's something that will be revealed, likely be revealed in the end. And here, it's just as likely that it will be revealed if he is alive. So the one witness is not going to lie. Or maybe the reason that one witness is believed to say a husband is dead is because we're not really relying on the one witness completely. We're adding that to another factor, which is that the wife herself will check it out and before she marries again, because she's taking a big risk upon herself if she just goes and gets married. It's not like a monetary case where you just return the money. So therefore, we're relying really on her also to do her own investigation to make sure she won't be in a terrible situation where the husband comes back. And so in this case, really we're relying not only on the one witness but also on her. And regarding her, we already saw, first of all, that we don't believe her in the case of a wartime, because she may be making a presumption. And furthermore, here, because this is now in brackets, we'll check this out in a second. Sometimes she hates him, and she's not going to check, right? When she even hears a rumor, substantiated by one witness that says her husband died in war, she's going to be like, oh, good, I really didn't like him anyway. And so she will be less exacting than necessary, and she will go and marry again. And therefore, just because it's one witness, and he has no reason to lie, but the wife may have a good reason to believe that one witness. All right, this sometimes she hates him, is in brackets, is taken out because Rashid did not have it in his version. If we check the manuscripts, we see that it is found in all three printed editions. It is also found in two manuscripts, but is missing in two manuscripts. So this is kind of split down the middle. Whether we should include this or not. So back to the question. The question was one witness who says that this man is dead and it's within a war zone. So do we believe him like we would anyway? Because he's not going to lie. He's going to make sure. Because it may be revealed anyway. Or usually we actually rely on the wife investigating, and here maybe she will not investigate sufficiently. So we should not believe one witness in a time of war. So we're going to see a couple of attempted responses. Amar Rami bar Chama Tashema Amar Rabbi Akiva Kesheyaradeti Lenhardea Le'abed Hashana. Rabbi Baraita, where Rabbi Akiva says, one time when I went down to Nehardea to intercalate the year. This is actually interesting because we don't know much about what was going on in Bavel during the time of the Tanaim. We know a few Tanaim that came from Bavel, but the city like Nehardea, we know, became very important when Shemuel established the yeshiva there in the first generation of Amoraim. But here you see Rabbi Akiva, because there was a time of a problematic time in Israel, and he was not at maybe the Bar Kokhba times, and he was not able to set the calendar, decide is it going to be an extra month of Adar or not. He wasn't able to do it in Israel. He had to travel to Bavel, which was not under Roman rule, it was under Persian rule, and he could intercalate the calendar there, even though usually he's supposed to do it in Israel. Okay, so that's an interesting story in and of itself. But anyway, the point is, Amasati Nechemia ish bet Deli. While he was there, he saw the sage whose name is Nehemiah from Bet Deli, which seems to be a city in Israel. But he, for whatever reason, was also living in Nehardea. V'amar li, shamati she'en masi'in et ha'isha b'eretz Yisrael al pi ayed ehad, ela Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And so Rabbi Nehemiah says, I heard that in Israel, most of the sages in Israel do not allow a woman to get married based on one witness. If one witness says, I saw this man and he's dead, there's only one. If two witnesses come, for sure, everyone agrees. That's 100% proof. But if only one witness comes and says, I saw the guy is dead, in Israel, most sages do not allow her to get married, except for Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. He's the only one. And so it's a minority opinion, though they don't follow him. Rabbi Akiva confirmed, yes, that is indeed the case. You heard correctly. אמר לי, אמור להם משמי, אתם יודעים, המדינה הזו משובשת בגייסות. כך מקובלני מרבן גמליאל הזקן, שמסעין האישה על פי עד אחד. So Rabbi Nehemiah tells Rabbi Akiva, listen, you're going to go back to Israel now. I want you to go and report in my name. You know that this country is all full of troops. Now we're going to see what the relevance of this is in a second, that there's troops all around. Anyway, he says, I have a tradition from Rabban Gamliel the elder that one is permitted to allow a woman to remarry even based on just one witness who says, that the husband has died. Now, that's the bend of the Braita. Here's the proof. My medina mishubeshet begaisot, lav afagav de medina zo mishubeshet, kal mekublani shemasiin al pi edehad. Now, what does this line here mean? That there are troops all over. Doesn't that mean that this is a place of war? And even though that the country is all riddled with troops and there's a war zone, nevertheless, even in a war zone, you are allowed to rely on one witness to say the husband is dead. Therefore, this is a proof, the answer to the question. One witness is believed even in a war zone. But we reject it. No, it doesn't fit the wording, because he said there are many troops in this country. Why in this country? Is this Persia different from anywhere else? He should have said, any place that there are troops, any place that there is war, we will believe one witness. So what does it mean? His point in citing the troops was a personal excuse. He says, you know that there are troops all around, and it's impossible for me to leave my house, my family, and travel to Israel to come to the sages themselves. The way is dangerous. I can't leave my family alone. But that's why I haven't come all this time to Israel. Otherwise, I would make a trip to tell them, because this is a really important halacha. But so you're going back, so you can say it in my name. So you say that I told you that I know that Rabban Gamliel said that you rely on one witness. So all we know from this baraita is that you can rely on one witness in a general case, not in a time of war. He was not talking about a time of a case of a time of war. It just happens to be that he wasn't able to travel because of troops. So therefore, there is no proof from this case about one witness in a time of war. So second attempted proof. Answer. Tashema ma'aseh b'shnei talmidei chachamim shehu ba'im Abba Yosef ben Simai b'sfina v'taba'a. You had these two sages that were in a boat with Abba Yosef, and the boat sank. And so they left two widows, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi permitted their wives to remarry based on the testimony of women. There's no testimony of men there, but there were women that said, we saw the boat sank. Maybe they were at the dock and they saw the boat sink. And so he said, okay, that's good enough. And now, this is not a case where they didn't actually see the person dead. Rather, it's a turbulent time, you may say. And there's a presumption that probably if the boat sank, they probably died. Just like if someone's in a war and they don't come back, probably they were killed. And the status of women, even if there are many women, even if there were 100 women that saw it, have the same legal status as one witness. Unlike two men, which is 100% proof for everyone, you could do anything based on two male witnesses, but female witnesses is the same as one. So therefore, this case is equivalent to our question. Vekatane hisi, and it says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi permitted it. So you see that just like in a boat drowning, a boat sinking, and women saw it, we believe them, so too, one witness in a time of war should also be believed. So we can answer our question positively. But we reject this. Does that make any sense? Is that possible? This was a case where the water had no end. Now, we might say if a water has no end, then, like middle of the ocean, then there's no way they can get anywhere. But what they mean by that is the opposite. That because if it's a water that is enclosed, like a small lake, and we can see all around, and then we see someone drown, we see a boat go down, and then we'll look around, we'll wait there for a while, and we see no one comes up from any of the edges, because we could see all around, then you know for sure that the person drowned. It's worse. The case is more problematic, however, when we can only see one edge, but we don't see the other edge of the water. Maybe it turns and goes around something, and maybe the person survived, swam underwater, or held on to something, and was able to get out of the water somewhere else. So the law is that when the water has no end, then the wife is prohibited, right? If we don't actually see the body dead, the man's body, and we don't know if he survived or not. So therefore, the woman cannot remarry. So that was the case. So it can't be that we're relying on their testimony just because they saw the boat sank and we didn't see him come up. So that can't be, because we would never rely on, even if there were two witnesses, if it was an endless body of water, we wouldn't know. Rather, it must be that the woman said that they did find bodies. The bodies came and washed up, and we saw them immediately when they came out of the water. And we recognized them and said, yeah, these are the two sages. So you see, in this case, we're not relying on the testimony of the woman that they saw that the boat drowned, but rather we're relying on the markings that, the color hair, the size, and so on. So you see that this case is not the same as the question we were asking about. This is not a case of relying on one witness, but rather having distinguishing marks and an actual body there. And having actual body there is also not like a presumption of, I guess the person drowned, or I guess the person was in the war. So therefore, there is no proof from either of these two attempted answers. We don't have an answer. All right, but now that we mentioned the story of the two sages drowning, we're going to use it to answer some other questions about identifying objects. By the way, the previous discussion is extremely important in modern applications, tragically, in things like September 11th or the Yom Kippur War or other cases where a person was in a dangerous situation, but we do not find identifying parts of the body. So if you find, a limb, nowadays we can do DNA testing and all that. But if in those days you find a limb, but it's not one, a person can live without it. So maybe the person is still living somewhere else without their hand or without their leg. If you find a head, then you know the person's dead. But this involves cases of what's considered sufficient evidence that the person has really died. If we know that they were there was no way that they could get out. Is that enough? So these are very complex and very important halachot that sometimes are unfortunately applicable today. Okay, now the case that we're going is relevant to this. A certain man, he deposited sesame seeds with his friend. Can you hold this bag of sesame seeds for me while I'm going away? Then the friend comes back and says, okay, please return my sesame seeds. The friend says, you already took it. You already collected it, right? Okay. But the person who brought this, who's demanding the sesame seed, says, oh, look, but I gave you the certain amount, let's say 5 pounds of sesame seeds in a bag, in a barrel, and look, you have such a barrel, a 5-pound barrel of sesame seeds. So that's mine. It's the same one. He's giving an identifying marker. And the custodian says, no. This container, this barrel, the ones your sesame seeds you already took. I refilled it with my own sesame seeds. So these are not yours. These are different sesame seeds. You already took yours. Okay, so they both come to the rabbi to adjudicate the case. One claims you already took your sesame seeds. These are others. The other one says, those are my sesame seeds. They're the very same ones, the same amount. סבר רב חיסדא למימר היינו שני תלמידי חכמים ולא אמרינן הנח עזו לעלמא והנה אחרי נינו. So Rav Chisda said, wait a second, I know a case, I know a braita we just learned about two sages who drown, and people see the boat go down, and then a little bit after, they see bodies on the shore, dead bodies. So we don't say, oh, maybe those two sages got away, and these two bodies happen to be someone else's who also drowned here at some point in time. We don't say that, but rather we assume that we know there were two people on the boat and it sank, so these must be the same people. So too in this case, if a guy deposited 5 pounds of sesame seeds in a barrel, and they're still there, so we can presume that these are not other sesame seeds that he took and refilled, but rather these are the very same ones, and therefore he ruled in favor of the guy who deposited the sesame seeds, that he should be able to now take them back. That's what Rav Chisda was thinking. Amar le Rava, mi dameh. Rava says, hold on, it's not the same. Rava, also above, was the one who made distinctions, right? He's very sharp and says, it's not the same case. Hatam kamre simanim, hachashum shemeh, my simana itlehu. In the case of the boat, they saw the two men and their bodies, and they were able to give distinguishing marks. I mean, even if the body was disfigured after drowning and all that, still they could tell something, right? If the person had totally different color hair, different height, they would not, you would know that's not them. Whereas here, all sesame seeds look alike. So what identifying matter can you bring? And now what you say, they said, it's 5 pounds, right? It's a 5-gallon tank, barrel. And they said, this is the same amount. So you look at the same amount that I gave you. That's not any proof, because maybe it just happened to be the same amount, right? If I lend you a half-gallon of milk, and then I come to collect it and say, you already took back your half-gallon milk. I look in your fridge, you have a half-gallon. Look, it's a half-gallon of milk. That's no proof. Everybody has a half-gallon of milk. That's a standard size. And so the amount in that case is not a distinguishing marker. Okay, amounts in other cases could be a distinguishing marker. For example, if someone loses money, a bundle of money, and you're able to identify exactly how much is in there, well, everybody carries around different amounts of money, and so therefore that could be a distinguishing mark. Even nowadays, when I call my bank and they want to verify that it's me, they ask, how much do you have in your in the account? And so, as long as you're close, so that's one way to identify. Yes, you're in fact the owner of the account. Okay. Amar lemor kashisha bar Rav Chisda Rav Asher. Umi chashinan shema pinan. And so now we have a challenge against Rava. Note that this challenge is being made by Mor Kashisha, the son of Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda, who said that the cases are similar, is trying to defend his father against Rava. Rava is the one that said, no, maybe these aren't the same sesame seeds. It's not the same as bodies, where you can presume that these are the same bodies. They are the ones that just drowned. There's two other bodies happen to come up. That's very unusual, and bodies look different. But regarding produce, sesame seeds, it could be that they replaced one with the other. So now that Mordechai is going to challenge Rava, and he's speaking to Rav Asher now in a later, 2 generations later. Okay, mi chashinan shema pinan v'hatenan masa keli v'katub alav kof korban mem maser dalet dimua tet tebel tav teruma. Mishnah Maser Sheni says, if someone finds a vessel, just found it somewhere, but it has a letter kof on it. So you can assume kof is a marker saying that everything inside is designated as a korban, as an offering. We know, in fact, that people used to do this because archaeologists actually found a vessel here, and you can see it says kof resh bet. It says korban on it, so that no one else would come and just eat it, and they would know that they should bring it to the Bet HaMikdash. If you find a vessel and says mem on it, then you can assume that is maaser. If it's a dalet on it, then that's dimua, which is a mixture of tiruma and cholin, so it can be eaten by a kohen if it's tahor. Tet means te'ebel, which means teruma maser. It was not yet taken from it. And if there's a tav on it, then you know it's teruma. Shebishat asakanu kotvin tav tachat teruma. And why didn't they spell out the whole word teruma? Well, during a time of persecution, it was dangerous to write teruma. Instead, they had to hide it, so they also wrote tav. Not to show that they were keeping halacha. So tav just it could mean anything. Okay, so anyway, the point here is that if we find a vessel and we see a tav on it, we assume that it is teruma, and we do not assume that someone emptied out there was teruma in it once upon a time. Someone emptied it out and put something else, chulin, in it. We don't assume that. We assume that it's the same as what it was, and so too in the case above. The sesame seeds that are in the barrel, we can assume are the same sesame seeds that the guy deposited with the Bailey. Okay. Amar le Ravina the Rav Asher. Velo chashin an shema pinan. So Ravina, they're both talking to Rav Asher, but Ravina wants to defend Rava and say, oh, don't we worry that in fact they are different? Someone emptied it out and put something else in it. We do worry because look at the next part of the Mishnah, Ema Sefa. Rabbi Yosef Omer, afilu masach chavit v'chatub aleh teruma, hare elu cholin. He says even if you find a chavit and it says teruma written on the kli, the contents you can assume are cholin. Why? Shani Omer eshtakadava male teruma ufina, because it's likely that it was full of teruma last year, and then someone removed it and put in it chulin. So it's more likely that's chulin than not. So you see here that, according to the Biyoseh, at least, we do worry that someone emptied it out. So what is the essence of their machloket? So rather, you know what? Not only the Biyoseh, even Tanakama is going to worry that maybe someone reused the same container with different contents. So what are they arguing about? The Tanakama thinks that if in fact he changed out the contents, then he would have erased the letter on it, and so the fact that there's still letter on it means it is still teruma. Rabbi Yosef says, no, maybe he forgot, he was lazy, he just reused the same container and forgot to remove the taf. Or maybe he left it on purpose because he wanted to save what was inside to preserve the contents. How would that preserve the contents? From thieves. You see, there were often thieves that would take someone's property. They didn't care about lo tignov. But if it has tiruma, it says if you tell them it's tiruma, then they won't take it, because that's a serious prohibition. That even these thieves are pious thieves, and they would violate lo tignov, but they would not violate eating holy food if they were not a kohen. Maybe if he was a kohen, he would steal it. Okay, so those are always these funny thieves that were scared about some things but not others. But anyway, the point is that you see here that we do worry, according to all opinions, about switching one thing for another. And so now we have defended Rava's opinion that it is likely that one thing will be switched out. We end off the daf with one last case of an uncertain identity. We have a story. Yitzchak resh galuta bar achte dera bevai hava kazil mekorteba leaspamya. A man named Yitzchak, who was called the resh galuta, exilarch, or literally the head of the exile, and he was the nephew of Rab Bevai, and he was traveling from Cordoba. This seems to actually be referring to the city in Spain, Cordoba, which was a very ancient city, an important city, and he was going to Spain. Now, Cordoba is in Spain, but this must mean that he was going to some other section of Spain. Resh Galuta usually refers to the political head of the Jewish community in Bavel. So it could be that the head of the community in Bavel was traveling in Spain for some reason. More likely, this may be referring to the head of the Jewish community in every country. Any country had a community would have a head, and so maybe this Yitzchak was the head of the community in Spain. This seems more likely because Yitzchak Resh Galuta is not mentioned in the lists of Resh Galuta that we have. In historical records like from Rav Shira Gaon. Okay, in any case, he traveled from Cordoba to Spain. Ushchiv, but then he died. Shalchu mehatam. So the people in Spain sent a message back to Cordoba. Listen, Yitzchak Resh Galuta barachted Rabbevai habakazir mekotoba laspamia ushchiv. Yitzchak, the head of the community, the nephew of Rabbevai. He was traveling from Cordoba to Spain and he died. So you see that this notice gives a lot of identifying markers. It tells you his name. So we presume that it's the same person, right? That's the question. Do we assume that maybe there is more than one person named Yitzchak, or there's only one and this is the very same person? Okay, it seems strange to worry that there's more than one person named Yitzchak, the Resh Galuta, who is also this is a lot of identifying markers. But maybe this is all part of the story. Maybe the messenger himself just came and said Yitzchak, the nephew of Rabbevai. Maybe he didn't say all the different parts of it, because I would assume that there aren't more than one Resh Galuta. Okay, so in any case, he said some name, Yitzchak, son of something, has died. So couldn't we assume that that's the very person that we know, or maybe it's someone else? Abai Amar Hashinan. Abai says, no, we have to be concerned that this may not be the same person, and therefore his wife will not be able to remarry without further identification. Rava Amar Lo Hashinan. Rava said, it's okay, we don't worry about it. We assume that it's the same person. As long as some notice says that this is the person's name, that's okay. Happens to be a couple of months ago, I got a notice from the synagogue, from a synagogue, that some person died. I thought it was a different person, and I actually told someone, oh, that person died, and they were very sad, but turns out it was not that person, it was someone else with the same name. Okay. Amar Abaye, Mina Amina La Dahu Gita Dishtakach Benehar Dea. Uchti Besad Kelonia Mata. Ana androlinai nehardea petarit utrachet yat pelonit inteti. Abaya explained, how do I know, what's my source, that we have to suspect that there are someone else with the same name? Well, from the following story, there was a certain get that was found in the city of Nehardea. In the get, the language that was written in it was that on the side of the colony of the city, meaning Kilonia literally comes from the same word as colony, on the settled area of this city. I and Rolinai from Nehardea, sent away, meaning divorced, my wife. That's what it says in it. Now, they found this, and the woman wanted to use this as proof. See, I am divorced. That was the name of my husband, and there you go. I have a get. I have a proof that I was given this get. But the father of Shemuel, who lived in Nehardea and was the sage of the time, was not sure, because there may be other people named Rolinai in the city. So he asked a question of his teacher, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, in Eretz Yisrael, to ask, what should we do about this? And his answer was, you better go to check the entire city to see if there's anyone else by that name. And if it's a unique name, this is the only guy, then yes, you can use it. But if there's someone else by that name, maybe this was given by a different man to his wife. And so you cannot assume it's the same person. So that's why Bayasi says, I know from this precedent that you cannot use a name. It could be someone else by the same name. Rava says, hold on, why did Rabbi Yehuda say to check only that city? Maybe you have to check the whole world. I mean, it could be this comes from somewhere else. He happened to be in Nehardea, and so that's why he gave the get in Nehardea, but maybe he moved somewhere else, or he came from somewhere else, and Check the whole world to see if there's anyone else by that name. Because who knows? Maybe it's not the same person. So you see, that would be absurd. Ela mishum kibodo de Abu de Shmuel hu de shalach hachi. So therefore, you see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi really was not concerned about someone else by the same name. If this is a get, we find that she has it. Okay, good. We can assume that it's the same person. So why did Shmuel say to check? Anyone else in the city? That was out of respect for Shmuel. If he wrote back, oh no, you don't have to check. Basically, I would be saying to the father of Shmuel, that was a stupid question. No, you don't have to. So to give him honor, say, okay, you know what? Yeah, it's a good idea to check the rest of the city. If it really needed checking, then you'd have to check the entire world. And so Rava says your story itself is not a proof, and therefore I think we can assume that it is in fact the same person, and you don't have to check if there's anybody else in the world with the very same name. And on the next tomorrow's daf, we'll see further about the machloket between Abaye and Rava in yet other cases. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.